Gifts that matter most have no weight? How is that possible? When I was 6 years old, my oldest brother was 19. He had gotten married and left home for the summer. I'd left home that summer. It was a time of transition in our family. There would be one less plate to set at the table, and my siblings and me wondered who would sit in his chair and eat all the leftovers. He'd wait for everyone to have their fill, and then whatever was left in the pot was his. Then there was someone new to welcome that Christmas. As my brother and his wife entered the house laden with gifts, my mother was overwhelmed by the simple joy of his presence. I remember the gift he gave me that year. It was a small toy Jeep. Did I say convertible? That's important. I remember it most for two reasons. As a genderqueer child, I was so happy it wasn't a doll. And because he got on the floor with me to play with it. With our heads nearly touching, he showed me how to remove the top, fold down the windshield, and open the doors. It was made of metal, and best of all, he said, it doesn't need gas. Then he stood up and left my world to mingle with his wife and the other adults. I loved that Jeep long after I stopped playing with it. JR, I see you've got a Jeep. He was nodding. It decorated my room because it made my heart smile. It greeted me when I came home from college during school breaks. And my mother saved it when she converted my bedroom into the sewing room and gave it to me when I moved into my first apartment. I still have that Jeep. And while it may no longer decorate my home, the love it represents still decorates my heart. The gift my brother gave me that Christmas was not a Jeep. It was the time he took to enter my world and touch my heart. The Jeep is a symbol of enduring love in times of separation. The gifts that matter most have no weight. UU minister David Blanchard draws a distinction between presents and gifts when he says, presents are the sort of things that fit on lists, complete with size and color preference, and they're the sort of things we're smart enough to ask for. Gifts are altogether different. We don't usually think to ask for them, perhaps because we think we don't deserve them or don't want to risk expressing the need, or maybe we don't even recognize the need ourselves. Gifts differ from presents because no matter what form they take, they always represent something greater, something deeper, something more enduring. They are about things like love, respect, and affirmation. It is a tremendous gift to touch the heart of another, isn't it? To say to them, because of you, I am blessed. Perhaps there's someone on your gift list this year who has everything they could possibly ever need or want. For my siblings and me, that person was always our mother. One year when I had no money and there were no gifts to bring, my mother called and asked if I would come a little early on Christmas Eve to drive her to church because the sidewalks were too slippery to walk at night. I had left the Catholic Church as a young adult because it did not welcome or affirm my call to ministry as a lesbian and a woman. But I knew my mother's faith was the glue that held our family together. So when I dropped her off, she thanked me for the ride and told me exactly where to pick her up to avoid the usual traffic jam. As I navigated my way through the bustle of a church parking lot on Christmas Eve, something unusual happened. A car pulled out in front of me, blocking my exit to the street, and leaving the best parking space in the entire lot empty. How can anyone refuse such a thing? It's always been the best parking space in the parking lot. So I pulled into the parking space and decided to wait in the car. When I noticed the gas gauge begin to dip, I turned off the engine, but it wasn't long before I started to shiver in the cold. So I decided the church foyer might be a good place to wait. And as the heat slowly penetrated my clothing, my body started to relax. So I looked in the foyer for one of those usual metal folding chairs that are always in the foyer. They're always there. But there were none to be found. An usher emerged from one of the side doors to the sanctuary and asked if there was anything he could do. I said, "No, thank you. I'm just waiting for someone." I stood there in a quandary as I heard the Christmas music begin to play. Reluctant to go in and sit down, reluctant to remain standing in the foyer for an hour and a half, I searched for something to read, only to discover the literature rack was completely empty. You see where this is going? I didn't. I thought about my options and decided I couldn't possibly find my mother in a sea of holiday worshipers. I kid you not, the timing was impeccable. And just then, like the pearly gates to heaven, the double doors to the sanctuary opened wide, and no one came out. Now, I didn't know at the time that the church had installed push plates. So it's like the parking spot. So I leaned into the sanctuary to survey the situation, and lo and behold, there she was, sitting just a few rows in and at the end of the pew. It appeared to be standing room only, with people lined up behind the back row and down the side aisles. And just then, my feet developed a mind of their own, so the rest of me went along for the ride. I walked into the sanctuary, and as I approached my mother, I noticed how deep she was in prayer. So I lightly touched her shoulder, and she simply slid over without bothering to raise her head. And I sat there in wonder, calculating the improbable odds of such a series of circumstances that had led me to this moment. When she opened her eyes and looked up, she saw it was me, and her jaw dropped in shock and amazement. And as we stood up to sing, she turned to face me. Supposed to look this way, we're taught this in Catholic Church, eyes straight ahead. Turns to look at me with, wanting an explanation. So I just looked at her and shrugged my shoulders and said, "Oh, it wasn't me." It was always difficult for my mother to express her love with words. But the love she conveyed to me in that pew was palpable. Later that night, as we hugged and said goodbye, she thanked me for the best gift I have ever given her. I couldn't imagine. I hadn't given her anything. I said, "What'd I do?" "You sat with me in church." Since my father had passed away a few years before, she was now left to sit alone in the church pews. She could ask for a ride to church and be sure of my response. But out of her respect for me and perhaps fear of rejection, she could not ask me to join her in the celebration of the Mass. That would have to be freely given. And so it was. And on that day, our love deepened. The gifts that matter most have no weight. They are invisible and felt only through the heart. In 2009, a science fiction film called Avatar, written and directed by James Cameron, there's a princess of the Na'vi people named Neytiri, and she encounters the avatar of a human named Jake on the alien planet Pandora. Is anyone familiar with the Avatar series? Yeah? Oh, not many. Okay, this is a treat. Oh, okay. You're shy. The Na'vi people are indigenous to Pandora, and their existence is threatened by humans who mine the planet for its abundant supply of a valuable mineral called unobtainium. Jake's mission as a spy is to advance the mineral exploitation of Pandora. In human form, Jake is a paraplegic Marine veteran. When he assumes the form of an avatar, however, he is able-bodied and experiences a new way of life among the Na'vi people who value peace and live in harmony with their environment. Ultimately, Jake allies himself with the Na'vi people to save Pandora from the exploits of his own species. Moved by the transformation of Jake's allegiance, Neytiri gazes into the eyes of her beloved avatar and says to the one who lives within, "I see you. I see your essence, and it is beautiful in my eyes. I know your heart, and I am blessed by your being." Jake had entered the world of the Na'vi people and was transformed by what he experienced. The gifts that matter most have no weight. It is a tremendous gift to touch the heart of another, to say to them, "I see you, and because of you, I am blessed." In our family, there is one nephew who is especially talented in everything he does, to the extent that there is nothing he cannot do and do well. He barely attended elementary school and dropped out of middle school because it didn't challenge his mind. His expertise and skills are in constant demand, and his phone never stops ringing. So I'm privileged when he is able to block out an entire day to help me solve some of the larger problems of being a homeowner. Like when the pipes burst in the mudroom one winter. On this particular day, he asked me for a pencil so he could measure and mark the materials to re-insulate the mudroom floor. So I sharpened a new pencil and gave it to him. We started early and worked side by side in the crawl space under the floor well into the night. When the job was finished, he thanked me for the pencil and handed it back to me. I looked at the nub he left in the palm of my hand and laughed because he hadn't even used the eraser. In fact, the eraser was larger than what was left of the pencil. He thought, in all seriousness, it still had some utility and suggested I don't throw it away. I thought it would make a good eraser, so I left it on the kitchen table. In the months that followed, I contemplated that pencil whenever I sat at the kitchen table. How many of us use up the lead in the pencil of our lives before we wear out the eraser? It seems to me what was left of this tiny pencil was a testament of his genius. So that Christmas, I framed the pencil in a small shadow box and wrote on the back, "When you see this pencil, I hope it reminds you of our day together and how gifted you truly are." Now, when he was given this lightweight box at Christmas, this is a guy who's used to getting heavy tools, he couldn't imagine what was inside. And when he unwrapped the present, he immediately recognized the tiny pencil. And as he read the inscription on the back, I held him in my gaze from across the room and said from the depth of my heart, "I see you." As I explained the significance of the tiny pencil to the rest of the family, the magnitude of his delight had the power to transform the darkest night into the brightest day. Later that evening, he told me he has never taken the time to decorate his home because he's only there when he's asleep. And he also doesn't like clutter, so he doesn't keep stuff unless it serves a purpose. But this gift, he said, was going on his dresser so he could see it at the start and end of each day. The gifts that matter most have no weight. They are without substance, often woven into some simple token. They are given to us by the hand of life in grace, like moonlight on fresh fallen snow. Frost delicately etched on a window pane. A crackling fireside, bright because of who is there beside us. Aromas of cooked food betokening a family feast. Reunions of those long separated. Memories of Christmas past, but not forgotten. Anticipations of the new year yet to be. Gift givers whom we love, and the gift of life itself. Gifts that matter most have no weight. So as we enter this holiday season, let us recall all those gifts that matter most in our lives. The Jeeps, the pencils, and those special moments with loved ones, and receive their enduring grace anew. May we welcome the mystery in our lives, and may we bless one another with our many gifts this holiday season. May it be so.